Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, where the mind and gym come together to help you live your best life. Hosted by two fitness professionals and your personal trainers, Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie. Welcome back, folks. Matt Gluckman here, Eric Menchie as well. Here we are your hosts of Think Fitness Life. And this episode, we're going to be talking about different perspectives on a couple topics. One is goals and priorities. Another is squat versus deadlift. And another is obstacles versus opportunities. Before we get going, Menchie has our weekly workout. And we'll always save the food for thought for the end. Take it away.
Weekly workout. Sprints. 10-second sprints with 20-second rest. We're going to repeat for 10 reps. Once you get done with that, we have hamstring fallouts. Always a good one. 30 reps total.
Brutal.
In as many sets as it takes you to get to 30. Very underestimated. It's not going to be like a 3x10 because your hamstrings are going to feel it. Once you get that, 30 reps total. Then we got hamstring bridges, 60-second holds for 2 reps. And that's your workout. Little sprint, hamstring work, call it a day.
Sounds easy, but you'll be gassed and you'll be happy the workout's over.
It might not be the hardest thing you've ever done, but it's going to be, you're going to focus on quality of the sprints and then quality of the hamstring reps here.
Yeah, and this is just great for challenging the ceiling. If there's one thing if there's only one thing you could do for the rest of your life to stay in shape, I would pick sprints.
Oh, easily.
Yeah,
100%.
let's get into the first topic. Yeah, I mean, I try to sprint at least 3 times a week. Honestly, I just love how loose and opened up it makes me feel. And obviously the stress on my cardiovascular system, heart and lungs is important. And it's just one of those ways when people are battling demons or battling with their mindset or thinking too hard, it's definitely one of those activities that you don't have time to think.
Nope, you just go.
A true sprint.
Just go.
Exactly. Just let it run, let it ride. Well, so the first topic I think is really important to put into perspective for people. And where I was coming at with this was understanding people's goals and mapping it out for them, but then also understanding what variables those goals entail and then the priorities of those variables. So where I started with was just taking a list of the variables: training volume, recovery, nutrition, stress management, sleep, and intensity. And then with that, I took the major goals: strength, fat loss, bodybuilding, and athleticism. So amongst those 4 goals, we'll say, I wanted to size up the 6 variables into like a semi-priority list so that people can understand vice versa. They'll understand, wow, that is my goal, or they'll understand, wow, I don't have what it takes to get to that goal. And clearly I'm more of, my commitment level is only set up to really maintain right now. And maybe when I get some free time or if I get work in a good situation or the kids go back in school, I'll be able to put more priorities and hunker down on these other ones. And it's just really helpful, I think, in managing people's expectations to understand what goes into living a healthy life and putting their best body forward. So, and maintain is a whole separate category. I'll get to that later. But so, because it's important to recognize, like, if you're, and maybe I'll start with that one. If you're someone who just works out really hard every like 2 to 5 days, or just when your body feels super refreshed and ready to go, you're probably getting back to homeostasis and then just putting a little bit of stress on your body, or maybe it's an intense amount of stress, but in terms of like a 7 day or 10 day span, it's not that big of a consistency of stress on the system. So it comes up, and then you wait 3-4 days until you feel super refreshed and ready to go and well rested and everything. And then you go up again, and then you come all the way back down. And that's the maintain phase. That's the maintain mentality and perspective of someone who really isn't really going anywhere, but they're just trying to make sure they stay afloat. And it's like that again, like every 2 to 5 days, you do something pretty intense, maybe total body as well.
And you got to be
But so
careful
back to,
with the maintain, that you don't get to the point where you're not maintaining and you're actually losing.
well, I think a lot of people who think they're maintaining are actually slowly losing
I
until
agree.
they get to a point where shit has hit the fan, or it's time to reinvest themselves, or they get
Mhm.
remotivated somehow, intrinsically or extrinsically. Maybe they had a good trainer that designed a better program for them, or coach them on their perspective and their mindset, or they just realize, they look in the mirror and they're like, shit, I really need to lock this into gear.
And maintaining only going to be 2 days. Anything under 2 days, you're probably not, you're doing nothing for your system. So maintaining is a 2 day week workout, 2 days out of 7 that you're working out.
And we're really talking about kind of the homeostasis and allosteric response. If you're constantly at homeostasis, this like sine wave that stays at the same level all the time, whenever you work out or do something for your health, you're creating that stress, that allosteric response. And if you don't do that in a consistent enough manner, you're never actually adjusting that sine wave to a new norm. So then when I look at training volume, recovery, nutrition, stress management, sleep, and intensity, I'm going to repeat those for probably the next 5-10 minutes. We'll start with fat loss. In my experience, what I've seen, what I've observed with clients or just individuals at the gym, is that training volume wants to be high, recovery and intensity can be low in terms of spending the time and energy on active recovery and actively getting super intense. And then for sleep, stress management, nutrition, the focus is heavy. So where I want someone to, if you think of like your mental bandwidth, and your goal is fat loss. So you have a client whose goal is fat loss, and you're looking at all 6 of these variables. You can't be greedy and want everything to be perfect. So you got to pick and choose kind of the priorities. And again, training volume high, sleep, stress, and nutrition super heavy in their bandwidth, intensity and recovery really not super important in their bandwidth. I'm not going to tell them to spend 15 minutes on a foam roller. I'm not going to tell them to uh, haul ass at the gym when they're there every single day. But I want them moving every single day. I want them breaking a sweat every single day. I want them getting their heart rate up every single day. And that's where the volume comes in at being a high priority. Agree or disagree with what I just said with fat loss?
No, agreed. For especially for weight loss and fat loss, a high training volume is probably the best place to start in the gym.
Yeah, because you're actually building, like, yeah, one day you want to be pumping iron and having that chiseled body, but you're actually building that aerobic base that's going to help you when you go to the weights later
Which is
after
fine.
you've lost some weight.
And even if you do weights, you still keep the training volume higher, 10 plus
Hmm.
reps, higher volume training. You're still going to tap into the aerobic work zone if you work into higher reps. It's going to be longer duration sets. It's going to pull you there no matter what.
Yeah, and the other thing that's important about this is when you're talking to clients and explaining that to them, because you need to manage their expectations and prep them for the future days to come, which is like you're telling them, yeah, these are hard workouts, but this isn't like the high intensity or the heavy load on your system that we may get to when you lose 30 pounds, right? So I think it's important to help put it in people's perspective like that. And that's why that's why a lot of the goals and coaching end up being more about nutrition and stress management and just health in that regards, rather than really coaching them in like a heavy deadlift or heavy squat with like an athlete.
Yeah, that'll
Um,
come. But for fat loss and weight loss, the primary focus is keeping the body in motion and keeping that consistently going.
yeah,
So that's right.
yeah,
Your intensity is going to fall short. It's going to come down a bit until
and
you
that's
get to
okay.
a point where the intensity is going to come up a little bit, and you're ready for that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
It's just
majority
some
of
people.
your training is going to fall within higher volume ranges,
Yeah,
higher volume of
and
activities.
you're going to get people who with you they've never worked that hard and they're going to say, wow, this is like the most intense workout I've ever done, and that's okay.
Right.
But they need to know that this is what you're looking for them to get to on their own, is
Mm.
that when they're on their own, because they might see you once a week, twice a week, maybe once every other week, but they need to get to that point where they're working their system, they're gassing themselves out, they're sweating, they're breathing hard for that 40 minutes, that duration, that endurance, 4 or 5 days a week. um
Yeah, and intensity doesn't necessarily mean that you're not coming in and working out hard at the gym because you will be putting in hard work and hard effort. Intensity is coming from the standpoint of we're not here to load you up with heavy weights for consistent time or really, 100%, 90% sprints consistently. You can still do sprints. The intensity might be at like 60, 70%, but you're going to do that for more volume. You're still training sprints, but it's just not at the high intensity because that's not what your goal is here. You can
right,
get there. You're still go in and have a great workout. To you, your rate of perceived exertion is going to be high, but
right,
we're talking intensity on programming sides.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's I just it's even important just to
Yeah.
um coach that,
Oh
the way
yeah.
that you would coach the client. So moving right along, the next goal we're going to assess is strength. um with strength, I have recovery and intensity are high priorities. And when I talk about recovery, just basically setting things up, like active recovery, setting things up to be prepared for another high intensity lift. Um, Versus the person who did fat loss, after their workout, they might be good to just walk to the locker room, walk to their car, and they'll be good the next day. Whereas the goal for strength, you're going to want to do some type of active recovery after, and maybe even that night, and maybe even in the morning when you wake up. The intensity is going to be a high intensity. We're working in rep ranges of 1 to 5 reps. So your max exertion, sub max exertion. The training volume, I wrote medium because I don't want to say low, but I don't want to say high either. I don't want to say, because I've seen the guys who do strength 5, 6 days a week, and they're usually synthetically boosted, if I will. Um, and again, this isn't athleticism yet, so we'll save that for a different point in a few minutes here. But so then, sleep, stress management are on the low priority list, because I've just seen like firefighters have these intense workouts, take good care of themselves, recovery side of the gym, but only get 3, 4 hours of sleep and still be able to haul ass like that 3 days a week, 4 days a week. Again, medium training volume, not low, not high. And then nutrition, medium. And I wrote medium for nutrition because um, it's really super important for like pre and post, versus like an athlete where it's going to be a heavy focus and everything they put in their body is going to be dialed in like they're trying to be a cold-blooded killer. So I'll repeat that one more time. For strength, recovery and intensity were high priorities. For nutrition and training volume, they were medium priorities, and then sleep and stress were on the low priority list.
The only one I would maybe flip for me would be sleep, just because strength involves high CNS activation. So I would just, it's not, it's not like you can go every night consistently with 3 to 4 hours. There are like 100% outliers, but if you're
Right.
working consistently, and depends on relative intensity with this, you want to be able to get good sleep to help your CNS recover. So I would probably put that a little bit more moderate. Um,
I get what you're saying, and I guess where I'm also wanting to put this in perspective is like where people are going to direct their limited mental bandwidth. So in my hopes with the strength category, and this is just my perspective, was like if they're already focused high priority on the recovery and the intensity of the workout, they're intrinsically going to be tired, and they should get the sleep anyway to not have to really put a mental bandwidth around like I got to be in bed by this time and I can't wake up any time earlier than this, and like got to be diligent in that regards. Like I would think more of the focus for kind of again their mental bandwidth would be on how they lift during their workout and how they recover after their workout.
and you could always switch depending on how you feel, right? So it's interchangeable
Totally.
variables. So if you're like, I'm doing that, man, some people might feel great off of that. They're like, this is
Yeah.
great, it's working. Other people might be like, nah, like I'm just not feeling it. And just say, okay, take a little bit of mental bandwidth off recovery. So maybe instead of doing your foam rolling at night, you just go to bed 30 minutes earlier. Oh, that works better. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the great thing about this matrix is it's so interchangeable. It's not
Yeah.
one set reaches
No.
all. We're just kind of
No.
outlining what we think is
Just a
appropriate.
general
Yeah.
start.
And you
Right.
can always mix and match and plug things in differently to where individuals lie. And I think what's a great point, and we always come to these crossroads eventually in this field is there's no right and wrong. You know,
Nope.
you have an opinion, I have an opinion. There's multiple ways that we can figure this out, and a lot of times everyone just looks for that. What is the right thing? What did he say that? And every human being is different. I sometimes if I get opposite, if I get too much sleep, I don't function pretty well. So I'm pretty much like a 7.5. Anything over that, I'm just like, nah, not really that great. On the recovery side, if I get good recovery, I know my sleep's going to be there. So I 100% agree with where you're coming from because that
Yeah.
recovery almost just builds into that sleep aspect of it.
But I love how you call it the matrix because it really is just like a square of variables to different like almost like a slide rule of like okay this is lined up here and here, what does that make me, okay boom, and it's just a general framework to give coaches and trainers a better idea in how to coach a client who may be saying XYZ but their priority list shows
Right.
the opposite or something different.
And there's some things that are going to be pretty much solid on this matrix and everyone's going to agree. Like fat loss is training volume high, strength is moderate to high intensity. Like that's you're not going to be strength and be like training volume high. Like you're not not going to happen if you want to
Yeah,
get
like
that outcome.
essentially we could have also made like a big huge Venn diagram with like four circles and what ones would be most important for all four goals, what would be important for these two
Right.
goals, you know what I mean, and different kind of headings like that,
Because I'd even
like
say
because like you said there are some things that are
a little
definitely,
overlap.
yeah, and some things that are definite one category versus another.
Like training volume, you will get stronger, but you're not going to get the full effect of strength where you want it to be.
Hmm.
Just like if you were fat loss, if you do strength work where you have higher intensity, but the work and volume's not there, you can still see some results, but it might not be accelerating to where you want it to be or the results that you're looking for, the goals that we're pushing you that way towards.
Yeah.
What do we got next?
um
We got the good one.
Bodybuilding.
Oh man.
So bodybuilding, training volume high again, recovery medium, intensity medium slash high, because you can get away with bodybuilding and building a muscle without super high intensity. You can do hypertrophy through things,
Some bodybuilders will dabble in high intensity stuff,
and they
which
will,
is
and that's
fine.
why I actually wrote medium
Yeah.
slash high, because it definitely like toes the line between the two. And same thing with recovery. Some bodybuilders really spend just a little bit of time in recovery, stretching, foam rolling, stuff like that, and others spend a lot more time. So I did write medium and high for both recovery and intensity. So it's like somewhere between the two of medium to high, but training volume high, recovery intensity medium high, sleep I wrote low again, and stress management I wrote low again, because people who are bodybuilders usually are intrinsically getting sleep and intrinsically managing their stress because they're in the gym pumping iron, pumping away their problems all day long.
And
And
what'd you
then
say for
nutrition,
nutrition? High.
heavy,
Yeah.
heavy priority.
Nutrition's probably the biggest one here.
Heavy priority. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because you're eating 5 meals a day. You're trying to eat every 3 hours. And some people are so intense that they'll wake up in the middle of the night to get the rest of their last meal in.
Mm.
And that was kind of my background was, well, it was more sports athletic, and then sophomore year of college was like 130 pounds soaking wet, and then blew up to like 150, 155. And all we were doing was, again, the training volume was high, the training intensity in terms of like the length of the workout intensity, if you're taking like an hour and you're looking at the amount of time that you went intense during that hour, it's probably maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes in reality, to compared to like an athlete type of workout. So that's why I wrote medium and high there, because I think more of the strength side of things, like when you're going in and doing like a 5x3 or 8x2 or whatever, you're doing a 5-3-1, your intensity is there the whole workout. But with bodybuilding, you can get away with the intensity can be high in the beginning, and you can just do a lot of hypertrophy at the end. So yeah, I think that one's pretty standard as well, pretty common across the board.
Mm.
Um,
And I obviously a claimer for people listening. It's like it gets skewed because of drugs, and it has been skewed because of drugs for
oh,
a
good
number of
point.
years. So when people, and I don't want to come out and say like, it's part of the sport. It's part of what bodybuilding is, but that's what allows them to get away with doing some of this higher volume. And sometimes strength work is because the whatever they're taking, the drugs, the supplements, actually aid in it. So whatever stress they're putting on their body, it's getting enhanced. So that's why we can see intensities and volume vary. And there's a lot of different bodybuilders that will say different reps worked for them or different schemes. That can be why. But if you're probably like starting out pretty natural, you probably want to dabble in a little bit of both and then really just be on point of your nutrition. But I'd say there's got
Yeah,
to be a blend here of intensity and training volume.
yeah, I agree with that. Um, okay, so for the last one, it is athleticism, and I'm talking about pro athletes or aspiring athletes, aspiring young athletes,
That's what we say. High
collegiate
school levels
athletes.
up. I say high
I'm
school.
thinking,
High
yeah,
school up.
yeah, and this one is it's a marker. So compare it to all the other three categories, right? Compared to the other four categories. Think of your maintain category, your fat loss category, your strength category, your bodybuilding category. Now you have the athleticism category of trying to perform and be the best animal you can be. So training volume, training recovery, training nutrition, stress management, sleep, intensity. These are all high priorities.
Yes.
And I'm not budging on any one of those.
No, this is one where you need to be on point. If you want to
On point, dialed
if
in.
you want
Yeah.
to see an outcome for performance, this is one where you just got to be dialed in. And that's what we see with some of these athletes, maybe collegiate and pro up. Like that's their livelihood.
True.
They
True, true,
train,
true.
they recover, they sleep, they get nutrition in. And Now, if you're what's in, this one's cool because you can have like some subcategories because you have like pro athletes, which is like a given. Then you have like
Mm,
collegiate athletes, which it should be all high, but we know they're in college, so they're going to go to parties. They're going to, they have classes,
right.
there are other things, but still, if you're at a high level, it's your primary focus is on that. What we really, the high school level athletes is kind of almost where you want to really get them to acknowledge that. So like they're going to
Mm.
have probably training volume and intensity is going to be pretty good. The other stuff is going to be might not be a high priority because they don't understand that stuff.
Yeah.
So the big thing is to help them understand like nutrition, sleep, stress management, and recovery is like plays a role for them playing well on Friday nights or Tuesday afternoons or Saturdays. And the more they understand that stuff, the more the training program will make sense to them.
But it's almost like, in terms of a coach or trainer, you're you're monitoring and coaching the longevity of an athlete. And yeah, there might be at the beginning stages on that continuum. So you're still, like you said, educating them and coaching them on why these are high priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And they not might not be doing that, but as the trainer, that is high on the priority list of things that you need to talk about.
Oh yeah,
These six variables,
totally.
especially for an athlete, because the biggest thing with an athlete, again, we talk about. I found my book, by the way. All the allosteric responses over um, a succession over days, weeks, months, years.
Yep.
That's what we're talking about, constantly growing like that. And then you also think of the competition. You got to think of, well, what is everyone else doing? And that's what set people like Kobe apart from the rest, because he'd be up at 4 a.m. and then he would actually go out with all his younger players who just got fresh in the NBA and say, "Sure, man, I'll go drink with you, I'll go party with you." But sure enough, 4 o'clock in the morning, he's knocking on their hotel room door because he doesn't want them to forget why they're there, and that was still a priority. Um,
Right. So it's like
so
as
yeah,
coaches and trainers, we have to like we're overseeing the training part of it. The volume, the intensity, make sure technique is there because that's important. But that's only an hour a day, 3 to 4 hours a week. To have them built into the program and understand the nutrition and sleep and the other side of stuff is just as important. So yeah, you're coaching them, but always at the end of sessions or workouts, always reiterating, okay, make sure we're hydrating, make sure we're getting good quality protein and foods in to refuel the body. And then if it was a big workout, so for young kids, I really don't tell them to like, all right, go foam roll because I know they're not going to do it. I'm like, okay, big workout, go home, get some protein in, kick your feet up, get your feet elevated, and play some video games for an hour. Like, get off your feet to recover a bit, and then obviously get to bed, get some sleep. And you reiterate that, and if they see results, they understand why. There might be setbacks, or they see other kids doing things that are successful. It's like, okay, what's this person doing that I'm not? They're putting in high priorities to all variables of this program, and it's working. And that's
yeah,
for all
yeah.
these be four categories. The hard thing is you can do great in one category, but if you're not doing great in another category, the program might not be 100% efficient. It's when we start
Mhm,
taking those couple of those categories and putting them together and we
mhm.
start getting spillover in the circles and we're like, okay, now this is all working, coming together, you see the program work. So it's very important, like people understand that it's just not just coming into a gym for 1 hour out of 24 hours a day. Like this whole program is variables that are not really changing, but maybe like undulating here and there, but they're all important.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. And it's just such a good framework to, like you said, to kind of think about, what are they dialing into, what aren't they dialing into, where can I adjust the program accordingly, or where do I need to you know be the coach essentially for
Mm-hmm.
them, that's going to get them towards their overall outcome and goal that they're trying to
Yeah.
attain.
In coaching, you could pick one and focus on one a week. Now the training volume intensity, that's going to kind of come within, but okay, this week we're going to focus more on stress management. Still, you're still going to get workouts in, but you're going to coach them and, talk to them a little bit more about stress management and how they're
and
feeling doing with it and where they're feeling their stress is coming from and how do you
and
mitigate that.
it's such a beautiful way to make use of downtime. A lot of coaches, will be just maybe getting distracted or shooting the shit with their athlete, and that's fine and dandy from time to time, but you can't forget while you're there. And it's just such a great way to help the development of the individual or the athlete, um, by keeping it relevant and being that source of reminder for them to, hey, so how's the diet going? Hey, how's the sleep been over the last couple of days? How's managing your stress levels going? And maybe not spending too much time talking about it, but ask them a question about it, and then give them something to work on
Mm-hmm.
to
Puts it
help
on their
improve.
radar. And then the
Yeah.
answer you get can affect the rest of the variables. So, okay, hey, I got 3 hours of sleep last night. My stress was high. There's, family events going on. Okay, as a coach, I say, maybe the intensity is not going to be a moderate high day today. Let's scale this back. Maybe training volumes a little bit higher, but we dial it back because this person's not in a framework to really hit it hard that day.
And that's just being the adjustable trainer that we're supposed to do. Anyone can look up the perfect program online, but monitoring progression, regression, and being able to adapt or adjust on the fly, that's the beauty of the trainer. Just like being able to adjust someone's squat form or deadlift form, accordingly based upon what their patterns look like. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that's another big topic that we wanted to touch on today, just about how a squat can become more like a deadlift or a good morning, or how a deadlift can look just like a squat but with a handles, and they're holding a trap bar between them.
I always see it all the time, and it's pretty big. And I think nowadays, as we're getting into this newer training age and science, we're kind of really breaking this down where squats should not look like a hinge. And I think that kind of coaching style is gone. And we see it often. And it's so what it's looked like is like if you're doing a back squat or even a squat, like a goblet squat, and the hips are shifting back. So the hips are shifting more posterior and getting horizontal displacement going almost behind the feet and your chest is coming down at an angle, you're hinging. That's not a squat. A squat is when your hips are more vertical displacement straight up and down. And it becomes a problem when people lose range of motion or movement strategies. So now they think they're squatting, but they don't know how to actually move their pelvis or move their hips or move their femurs or control their ankles. So what's the next best option they do? The hips are just going to go the easiest path and they sit backwards. And as the hips sit backwards, they're going to slightly anterior tilt forward and you're going to get compression through the back, lumbar spine, some sacral compression because it's just the way the hips are moving. And if you load it, the problem is you load it up over time, you're going to cause tissue damage and you're going to cause poor movement patterns and it's going to lead to injury. Also, you're not going to get the training effect you want. So when you're looking at people squat or you're squatting yourself, and sometimes you feel it. You feel your hips shift a little too far back, or I know I sat just a little too far back. Somehow I got shifted back a little bit, and that's not what a squat is. And that's
Yeah.
very hard for people because I have clients that we don't squat because of that. We deadlift. We do a lot of that stuff. We do single leg squats. We do split squats. We do supported squats, TRX squats. But once I get something in their hands, or I don't even put anything on their back, they just turn it into a hinge pattern. They don't know how to differentiate. Okay, this is what a step down looks like, squat pattern, step down versus double leg squat. So that's the big thing when it comes to a squat in a deadlift pattern is like you shouldn't be hinging your hips back. Your hips should be sitting straight down as your knees bend forward. And if we're seeing that, there's some movement restrictions that that person has, and we need to correct them before we continue to load them or load them any further. And then vice versa with the deadlift. I'm sure you've seen this more often with kettlebell deadlifts. You get down and people like squat down and they turn it into more of a squat to pull it off the floor than actually hips
Yeah,
are up.
yeah.
Same thing. Their system somewhere is losing the ability to go hips back.
You said with a kettlebell swing.
Sorry,
Is that what you said it with?
kettlebell deadlift.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, because maybe because the stance is wider and it's an easier pattern, but I often find that it works that way.
yeah.
And then once you get someone like hips up and chest forward, they're sometimes their balance might be off because they're not used to in that position. And then creating force and pushing through the floor and moving the hips forward from that position. That's what we're seeing.
And I think what's kind of interesting is it's uh, it's like a trickle down effect. Um, College athletes perform really well with some minor movement competencies and patterns, but then like high school athletes, even worse. And your pro athletes typically have good movement quality and good power and just good mechanics. And I just think it comes with kind of like the access to resources. So you can think of like a college level athlete um, probably has more access to quality trainers, informed trainers, and staff than say a lot of high school programs. And I think a lot of times with athletes, trainers already see an athlete come in, perform something that they're used to working the general pop that couldn't do anyway. And they're just like, oh man, I'm happy you can do this. And they don't really adjust form too much. But at the same time, kind of back to when you're talking about the subcategories, you can kind of have a subcategory for like where, what period are they in? Are they in postseason? Are they preseason? Are they intraseason? And to what extent can you take the time to clean up their form and still get them getting the demand on their system the way they need to maintain their performance? So I guess I have an example. Is I had a guy who I worked with his senior year of high school, and then he got accepted to a D1 school, and he came back home for like spring break or some winter break or something like that, and we had like 2 weeks to work out together. And I just kind of he gave me the program that his coaches wanted him to do, and I modified some stuff a little bit, really added some supplement stuff here and there, but I didn't really take the time to break down his form or clean up his form. I kept the kind of intensity and the volume he was used to and the loads he was used to. But then when I got to see him at the end of the school season, um, it was basically when COVID hit. So it was even earlier and more time for having a preseason and an off season. That's when we took the time to talk about the difference between a triple extension and a hinge pattern and work on things like the ankle mobility and really get his hamstrings um, to contract and shorten. So I do feel like um, and I don't know what, maybe I'm wrongfully on the topic of athletes, but I do feel like it's like the right opportunity to clean up form because it is definitely like a step back to take two forward. You're taking a step back in terms of the load and intensity so that the individual can properly basically code their system and be engaged, um, train those new patterns until they become automatic and more systematic, and then get them back up to those heavy loads and
Right.
intensities again.
And to have proper mechanics. Like if your athletes thrive on a field, ice, court, wherever whatever they do. If you're training in the weight room and giving them poor movement strategies, what do you think they're going to do when they step on a tennis court or a basketball court? Like that's the last thing you want to see. And all of a sudden their movement patterns break down, they get hurt and they go, oh, why did this happen? And then maybe you or someone else, they look at them, they test them and say, well, you were performing this movement in the wrong positions and strategies were compensating. So you didn't have, when you went to actually do the correct movement, wrong muscle chains are firing and you led to injury. And even with the general population, you've seen it all the time. They're good until a certain intensity hits, and then it's like, boom, it goes to crap. So and almost this is for everyone, because as the intensity kicks up, the sympathetics kick up, and your system's like getting more into fight or flight. So it's going to try to do anything. I've kind of started to realize once I start getting into like maybe 82 to 85% of people's maxes, that they're starting to go back to just lift it, do whatever I can. Under that, they're fine with form, but it's because if you don't stop them and correct them on proper form, eventually somewhere down the road, some exercise is going to give them a problem because they don't have the right movement strategies to get into position or to perform it with weight. And when that happens, they're going to come back. My back is tight, my hips tight. I did something to my neck. I jacked something up, or it's just going to look awful when they try to do that. Loading a squat for some people and then have them trying to go squat down. It's like, well, at 135, you were good, but I just added 20 pounds each side and something changed. Now, what changed?
Yeah.
Was it neurological because now you sense something different? So that's why it's good to take those steps back and really build a base for someone, especially, if you haven't been working with someone, but they come to you, you don't know what their past history is, how they moved, how they squatted, what they did as a kid, what they do now. So you kind of get a gist of it from talking to them and their movement patterns and histories and what they used to do. And then understand, okay, this is how this person moves. These are the exercises that I need to pick for them to get them to where they want to be. And it's very important when it comes to the squat and deadlift, because you don't want to have a deadlifting look squat, because it's just going to compress your lower spine and give you problems. And it's just going to jack your hips up even more.
Yeah. I think it does come down to a little bit of cueing. Like once you kind of educate an athlete on, a hinge versus a squat pattern, I think a lot of it does come down to cueing, because I think all athletes I've seen, all their strength and conditioning coaches back at their school or at their facility, they love the trap bar. And I think part of it is because they love the fact that they won't risk fatiguing the low back erectors or risk damaging anything.
Yeah,
because that is a lot of big fear in coaches is injuring an athlete. So it's definitely easier to say, I'll get these guys lifting heavy with a trap bar versus a straight bar.
It's a little bit more sport position specific, and it actually, the thing was with the hex bar, the research has shown that you can actually get more force development out of that than a regular straight bar. So that's why I think a lot of coaches go with it.
And I think because, back to your point too, is it's harder to get people to understand in a conventional deadlift that you are actually pushing as well.
Right.
So it's easier with the trap bar to do that. And it's easier for someone to keep their shoulder blades back. But ultimately, it's also easier for people to let that ankle mobility forfeit their deadlift and turn it into a squat. Does that make sense?
Forfeit the ankle mobility?
But excuse me, I shouldn't. Forfeit's probably not the best word, but so I was basically saying the trap bar is great for XYZ, but it also leads to the opportunity of engaging with the use of more ankle mobility and turning the deadlift into a squat pattern, because there's no bar in front of them.
Because the handles to the side.
Right.
I get it. Yeah.
Let's it be more of there's more room for failure, essentially. So in that regards, I think it does come down to cueing.
Right. Yeah, because you're changing position of arms and scapula on a rib cage can influence what the
100%.
what the what the hips are going to do, the thorax going to do, and then the femurs, and then the ankles. And if they
Yeah.
lose anything somewhere, it's got to go somewhere else for a strategy to come in. So that's why
Yes.
I'm sure you've seen it. You see people when they go, they'll get it up the first one. They deadlift it pretty good, hex bar, but coming down, they don't know how to sit their hips back. So that's when they turn it into a
They just
squat.
sit.
And
Yeah.
almost sometimes you'll see the heels come up because they can't keep the heels down because they don't
Mhm.
know where to put their body in space. And
Yeah.
things are just like, okay, where hips are coming down, but my heels have to come up to give my hips some space. And what's going on? I'm trying to keep an upright torso. And then you're like, okay, we'll reset it and let's get your hips back.
Yeah.
Remember, that's just
Yeah.
them trying to,
It's
if you're
so
not cueing it, like you said, it's them trying to figure out how to do this the way they just think it's supposed to be done. Okay, what do I use force?
right.
Let me get down and try to squat this thing to the floor.
Right. And a lot of coaches will be just satisfied with the weight that they're moving and not think they need to really cue differently. But you make a good point about the hips coming back because consequently you need to see those hips coming forward. And if you're watching your client or athlete trap bar deadlift and it just looks like he's standing up with weight, odds are he's triple extending and he's using his ankles, knees, and hips. And you want him to get more of the hips coming back so that the hips have the opportunity to come forward on that drive. So it's funny because it is just such a little perspective switch in terms of framework. But you could almost map this one out the same way that we mapped out uh, the goals. Like you could have like a matrix of um, basically what you're looking for, the hinge or the squat,
Mm-hmm.
and then what you're noticing, and then how to adjust accordingly. That might be interesting to put together one day, but I think it's pretty straightforward for most people. Like if if you're
Yeah.
deadlifting and trap barring, you need to be hinging. If you're
Yep.
squatting, you need to be
Vertical displacement, straight down with the hips.
yeah, that whole
Slight
system
slight
collapsing like a
posterior
spring.
tilt.
That's why they say you want to be able to have your femur, I mean your shin bone parallel with your spine
Yeah.
when you
It's
squat.
gonna be very
It should be
close. I
a
mean, you're just
collapse
hold
and
it.
then come out.
Yeah. And that's hard because that amount of flexion is very tough for people on a system.
Yeah.
That's what makes it go into more of a hinge pattern is the flex because you're not it's not just one movement, you're going through flexion and extension, but to get that flexion to occur in that bottom position is hard for people. That's a
Yeah,
very hard
totally.
concept to hold and keep everything in alignment and then to come back up. So,
But at the same time, if you're coaching an athlete, they don't need to get ass to grass. They
no,
need
I'm
to
just even getting down to like parallel for people.
right. But
That's
I
why.
guess
So you see people sometimes stop at about halfway. They can't go any lower because they're stuck because they don't know how to keep flexing or extending the system
mhm,
in that position. So what they'll do most times? Okay, I'm stuck. Where do I go?
bow forward.
Let me bow forward and push my hips back because I can keep going a little bit more. My hips are
Yeah,
going to tilt anteriorly. I'm going to be able to kind of keep going a bit, and then I can drive up out of it. So
yeah.
it's a false squat.
Um, it does make me also respect the fact that a lot of these um, coaches are dealing with teams and they might not get the time to address not only if someone's doing something wrong, but address the opportunity to notice if someone's doing something wrong. Because you can't just assume that all your other athletes are going to be able to watch your client or your team mate the same way that you as the professional can, because you have the years of experience, you know what to look for, and your brain is just trained in that regards. So because sometimes it is subtle, sometimes it takes, let me see you do another rep or let me see you do another set to really kind of hone in and take a look at what's going on in that body or that person's mechanics.
Right.
So I think that's important to note as well. But do you have anything else you want to say about this topic?
No, I think we're good.
Cool. I want to spend this last 10 minutes with our last topic, just riffing off of it, and then we'll end with our food for thought. Obstacle versus opportunity, and this whole episode definitely is has a lot of underlying themes of the finer details or framework or perspective. But obstacles versus opportunities, everything changes in life, right? Everything goes not according to plan, or life has those moments, and everything that comes up that disrupts your day or disrupts your sleep or disrupts your workout or disrupts a relationship or you get a ticket on the way to work or something like that. You can either treat it as an obstacle and think, why me? Or you can treat it as an opportunity to um, slow down, drive slower, or to really investigate into something that needs more attention from you. But it's a choice, and you can overcome and become better, or you can allow the obstacle to overcome you and think, "Why is me?" and basically become learn helpless. Um, so I just wanted an opportunity to bring that topic into play with the rest of these topics, and I have a nice food for thought that I want to finish off with. But there's so many stories of this amongst the greats in our world, um, and people who had terrible hardships come in their life and they just treated it as opportunity. There's a quote I can think of Thomas Jefferson. There's a story. Thomas Jefferson and his research lab, there's a big chemical fire and it blew up, and there's this huge chemical fire. You know, we can think of different colors, probably a green. And he and his son show up, and the first thing he says to his son is, "Go get your wife, go get your mom and sisters. This is probably going to be the biggest fire they'll ever see." And the next day, he went out and he started rebuilding again. He could have cried and said, "Woe is me," and tried to get government funding and other people to pay for what had happened, but he took what had happened to him and looked at it as an opportunity to spend time building from the ground up again. So I just think it's really important to mention.
Huge. That's a big way to look at a lot of things. You know, because we know we've been around for quite some time. Like there's good things and bad things. And what does it do if you just sit around and complain to someone else about the bad things? Like nothing really gets done, you know? I can remember times in the break room we'd be doing that. Like, you
Oh
know,
yeah, and we would just walk out. I remember
yeah.
that
And
because
you
it was toxic.
it was like, and I'm total like I we had spots and points in my career that I'd be the same way. And then you start thinking like, okay, but other people are successful. They're creating this, they have the same opportunity I do. Like, what am I doing? So instead of like complaining and like bringing other people into it, like you can be upset, but use that as a learning tool, a learning opportunity, and then make something out of it. Like there's always situations where you can make something different out of that. And I think a lot of times people need to look more at the opportunities that they can make or create out of a situation. Now it's not like it's going to hit you square in the face, right? It doesn't. It's not like boom, it's right here. Some people get opportunities like, hey,
Right.
here's a piece of paper, it's coming your way. Sometimes you have to step back and kind of think outside the box a little bit and be like, okay, what is this where's this opportunity coming from? And sometimes it's not that, it's the opportunities that follow. So you might reach out to someone, an old coach in the past. You're like, okay, just to chat, but then that's going to open the doors to further opportunities down the road. And that's what I've kind of looked at. It's like, yeah, you can do a complimentary session, the first session or whatever, but there's always opportunity down the road if you make a lasting impression.
Yeah, it does take kind of that zoomed out approach a little bit to let the let whatever happened hit you, let that initial shock wave kind of settle, and then figure out how you're going to turn it into an opportunity to be great or an
And
opportunity for a learning
yeah,
experience.
and
And
it might not be right away. Like there's,
right,
but it's got to be the long term sight has to be like there's going to be an opportunity because we've all been in those situations where you know things aren't going great in your life or where whatever situationally, and you're just like, man, this is miserable. But like you're thinking, there's going to be another opportunity. There's going to be another day. I'm going to be able to do this, and this. Keep on the path and keep thinking that way. It's very easy to start thinking backwards and like, oh, what if and that and this and I'm not going any. You can't do that.
should have been differently,
You gotta.
or why me?
Yep. You can. I tell people you can go there, but you can't live there. You can go there for like 10 minutes or 20 minutes of your day, but you can't live there.
But can't sulk.
You can't do it. You have to have a bigger vision of outside of what you want to be and what you want to do. And if it's easy for you, write it down. And if you keep forgetting, write it down and tape it in front of your desk or your mirror. We've talked about this before. Like, what do you want to do today? What is your opportunity today to make a better version of yourself?
Right along with the theme of everything we've talked about, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. Mic drop.
Thanks for listening. We hope you gained something from this episode. Our mission is to help people live their best life, both physically and mentally. Check out thinkfitnesslife.com for additional resources and schedule a complimentary assessment with one of us. We're always here to help.